The sky over New York was no longer a sky at all. It had become a constantly shifting window into hundreds of realities. Peter Parker stood on the roof of the Sanctum Sanctorum with MJ and Ned beside him, watching buildings flicker in and out of existence across Manhattan. One moment the Empire State Building stood where it always had. The next, a different tower stood in its place, surrounded by flying vehicles, before everything snapped back to normal and a new crack spread across the clouds. Peter's spider sense had been screaming for nearly an hour. One thing had become clear: the disturbances weren't random anymore. They were converging on him. Ned had been studying the readings left by the memory spell, while MJ tried to understand why her own memories kept returning faster than anyone else's. Peter knew they were running out of time. The stranger who'd first warned him was gone, Strange was still missing, and the only person who seemed to understand any of this was the mysterious black-suited Spider-Man he'd glimpsed once through a dimensional opening. Then the portal opened again, this time inside the sanctum. The older Spider-Man stepped through. Peter raised his fists, MJ moved behind him, Ned grabbed a device off the table. The stranger pulled off his mask and Peter found himself staring at his own face, aged maybe 20 years, scarred, gray at the temples, his black suit torn across the chest. There was no mistaking him. "So this is where it happened," the older man said, tired. Peter demanded to know who he was. The man explained he'd come from a reality where Peter had made a different choice, refusing to let the spell erase him, fighting it until it shattered completely. At first he'd believed he'd saved everyone he loved. Instead, he'd forged a permanent connection between realities, and his world had collapsed slowly over the years that followed. People vanishing, cities merging with alternate versions of themselves, villains pouring through the cracks, until almost nothing was left. "Because you're about to make the same mistake I made," he said when Peter asked why he'd come. Peter refused to believe he was responsible. The older Peter told him the truth gently. He wasn't causing this on purpose, he was the anchor. The spell had removed him from the world's memory, but because he was connected to countless alternate versions of himself, it could never erase him completely. Instead, it built a network of connections between realities, and every memory that returned made one of those connections stronger. MJ's full memory recovery had just activated the final link. "So it's me," Peter said. "It's always been you," the older man answered. "Then how do we stop it?" The older Peter looked at MJ instead of answering directly. "You have to forget him." The room went silent. "No," MJ said immediately. "Not just you," he continued. "Everyone." Peter understood. This new spell would have to sever every emotional connection tying the world to him. MJ, Ned, Happy, everyone he'd ever loved, all strangers again. And the spell needed an anchor, someone who stayed outside the network while it happened. The older Peter looked at him. "You." Peter would remember everything. Everyone else would forget. He'd carry it all alone. "Absolutely not," MJ said. "There's no other way," Peter told her. "We'll find one. We don't have time." She stepped closer. "You said that before. The last time. You decided what was best for everyone, you made the choice for me." "I was trying to protect you," Peter said, looking away. "I know," she said. "But you don't get to protect me by deciding whether I get to remember loving you." Peter had no answer. For years he'd believed responsibility meant carrying every burden alone. MJ was reminding him that love was never supposed to be a decision made by one person. Ned spoke up. "What if we don't erase the memories? What if we erase the connection?" He explained his theory. The spell treated memories like bridges between realities. Maybe they could sever the dimensional energy attached to those memories without touching the memories themselves. People could keep every memory of Peter without those memories tying this world to any other. "That shouldn't be possible," the older Spider-Man said. Ned smiled nervously. "That's usually when Peter says something ridiculous and somehow makes it work." For the first time all night, there was a flicker of real hope in the room. They worked through the night, Peter analyzing the energy patterns, Ned recalibrating the equipment, MJ digging through the Sanctum's library for anything on past reality fractures. Hours later they had a plan: isolate the memories instead of erasing them. Every memory would stay exactly where it belonged, only the dimensional energy linking it outward would be cut. But someone still had to enter the center of the network and disconnect the anchor by hand. Peter volunteered instantly. "You won't survive," the older Spider-Man warned. He explained that the center of the network existed between realities. Anyone who entered would experience every possible version of their own life at once, every choice, every death, every failure, all at the same time. "You survived," Peter said. "Not really," the older man answered, and Peter understood then that the scars weren't only physical. Before stepping through, Peter crossed to MJ. She took his hand. "If you don't come back, I'm coming back," he said. "You'd better," she managed through tears. Ned hugged him, whispering that Peter was his best friend. "You're mine too," Peter said. Then he turned to the portal, looked back at MJ one last time and stepped through. The world disappeared. He stood in an endless white space. No buildings, no sky, no ground, only memory stretching in every direction. Himself as a child. Aunt May, Uncle Ben, MJ, Ned, Strange, the Avengers, victories, deaths. Then other versions of himself. A billionaire, a man who'd never become Spider-Man, a villain, one who'd died saving his city, one who'd lost MJ, one who'd saved her, one who'd never met her, one who'd become exactly like the scarred man who'd brought him here. Every version had made different choices. Every one carried the same weight, responsibility. "Which Peter Parker are you?" a voice echoed. The older Spider-Man stood behind him. "I'm me," Peter answered. "That's the right answer," the man said. The multiverse didn't need Peter to be one perfect version of himself. It needed him to accept that every version was capable of mistakes, and none of that made any of them less worth being. Peter finally understood. The real problem had never been the spell failing. It was that he'd spent his whole life trying to control every consequence of every choice. He couldn't save everyone. He couldn't undo every tragedy. But he could still choose who he wanted to be. Peter reached for the center of the network. The multiverse shook violently. "Once you disconnect it, everything you've recovered could disappear," the older man warned. Peter thought of MJ and smiled. "Then I'll remember enough for both of us." He grabbed the connection. Light exploded through the multiverse. Back in the sanctum, MJ watched the portal expand as Ned shouted that the energy was destabilizing. The older Spider-Man smiled. "He did it." He pointed toward the sky. The cracks were closing one by one. The alternate buildings vanished. The portals collapsed. New York returned to normal. But Peter didn't come back with it. "Peter?" MJ called into the empty portal. "Nothing." She ran toward it, but the older man caught her arm. "Wait." The portal closed. Her heart sank, until a memory surfaced unbidden. Peter laughing. Peter beside her. Peter telling her everything would be okay. She could still remember him. So could Ned. The connection was gone, but the memories had stayed. Then golden light filled the room, and Peter fell through the collapsing portal onto the floor. MJ ran to him. His eyes opened. "You remembered?" he said weakly. "I remember everything," she answered. For the first time there was no countdown, no collapsing reality, no price left to pay. They'd actually done it. The older Spider-Man was gone, only a strand of black webbing left on the window ledge. Peter watched the skyline, wondering if he'd found his way home or peace, or if he was still out there somewhere between worlds. He didn't know. But for the first time, Peter understood his future didn't have to be shaped by what came before. Being Spider-Man didn't mean losing everyone he loved. It meant protecting the people he loved without deciding their lives for them. "Come on," MJ said, smiling. "Where?" "Home." They walked out of the sanctum together. Neither of them noticed the small crack still sitting in the corner of the room. Inside it, something moved. A pair of glowing eyes appeared for just a moment, then vanished. The multiverse had been saved. But something had survived. Something that knew Peter Parker's name. Something that remembered everything.